Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining. Today we'll be talking about using assessment to help determine agile maturity and areas of strength and weakness. You already heard a little bit about me. I'm going to talk a little bit about Siemens too. And I'm a member of employee at Siemens Healthineers, which is by itself a huge company, but it's also a part of the largest Siemens itself. Siemens Healthineers is roughly about $14.5 billion of business a year, and it's roughly 66,000 employees. So I'm one of many drones, I guess. Just as a little feedback in terms of when we talk about agile maturity and so on, just to know a little bit about the company itself. Okay, moving forward now. Today we're going to discuss what is agile maturity. It's a hypothetical construct that has many definitions. And then we're going to talk about how we defined it at Siemens. We're going to talk about the survey criteria determination, what are the factors that we used, where we got our information from, where our sources were in creating the survey, and then how we use comparative agility to be able to execute the survey. And we're going to do a little bit on the analysis of the results. Most of this conversation that I'm having with you today is going to be dealing more with how we set it up and what we're planning on doing. We're not going to be spending a lot of time on the results, mainly because of confidentiality constraints. We can't go into a lot of the details that we would normally go into if I were meeting with the teams and so on for obvious results. And then we'll have a summary, and I expect that we'll have quite a bit of time for questions and answers. Let's get started. Okay, so the first question really comes down to, what is agile maturity? And it's an interesting question because it's used all over the place. It's used way too much. I became interested in agile maturity about 3-4 years ago when I first read this business agility report. And it was like this 40-page report talking about, this company has a 5.6 rating, or this company has a 4.8. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. What exactly does that mean? Yes, we want to be more agile. Now we're moving to a 6.2. To me, they just started looking like numbers. So I started digging into it a little bit more. And what I found was the more I looked at it, the less I liked it. So, and the more confused I was by it, because if you take a look, see something here, and if you do a Google search on agile maturity, you see something like this, and it pops up. They're talking about a pre-crawl. I have certain criteria for a pre-crawl. I don't even know what a pre-crawl is. You crawl backwards. So basically, it's the way I interpret it is you're starting at a basic level and you're maturing from there. And companies are busy coming up with different criteria at different levels of saying this is a crawl, this is a walk, and so on. But it varies so much from one company to another, or from one description of what agile maturity is, that you can go from this to this, or to this, or this. And these are all just taken right out of my simple Google search, or this. The point that you sit there and you say, there's no consistency. And first of all, I have a lot of questions about just assigning a number to something. But second of all, more importantly, it doesn't have, if you don't have any basis for consistency across companies, what does it mean if you've got a 4.5 and this company is a 5.3? I mean, first of all, you're getting away what agile is, which is how is it helping the company? How is it helping the development? How is it helping the customers? And you're assigning a number to it. So you're already becoming distracted by a number instead of results. But second of all, you don't have a consistent basis of how to do this. Agile development maturity model, and so on. There are many, many different definitions. So what we decided to do at Siemens was we turned around and we said, first of all, how do you do this at Siemens? Second of all, do we want to do this? And we're a very large company. So if you take a large company like Siemens and you say, okay, remember, there's 66,000 employees now. That means there's many different projects going on. And the area we work in with Healthineers deals with a whole bunch of things. So it deals with CAT scans and magnetic resonance. And the division that I'm working in, the section that I'm working, is laboratory diagnostics. So the question is, which is basically, you go to the doctor's office, they take blood, and it comes back a few days later, and it says, this is your level of glucose, or testosterone, or a whole bunch of things. And it's probably running through one of the Siemens machines that I might have been involved with. But the point being that it's a very large company. And now you have a situation where you have one project might be working really well in Agile. And you've got a team that's some high performing teams and so on. And they're really doing some great work. And then you have another project where they're maybe not even using Agile, or they're using Agile in a very basic level, and they're not gaining much from it. So how do you determine how mature a company is at that point when you've got so many differences? And to top it off, and then you can have senior management, and we've had a problem in this regard where senior management can turn around and say, work harder. Yes, we want you to be Agile, but they're still following traditional waterfall or traditional management methodology. So now you've got all these different pieces, and trying to assign a number to it is very difficult. Or trying to get an idea of where the company is in terms of its Agile transformation and implementation, again, is very difficult. So the first thing we did was we said, what are some of the pros and the cons? And the pros are that the company decided a few years ago that it wants to go Agile. So they've made the commitment to move towards Agile. And towards that end, it provided quite a bit of training, at least on the basic level, for Scrum Master training, product owner training, and so on. And it has supporting tools now. We all use tools that utilize Agile and Kanban and so on. And so we have over 5 years of commitment to Agile. And we have people who are dedicated in certain roles, such as Scrum Master, product owner, development team, program, project management, and so on. And we have what I call different flavors of Agile implementations, where we might, some projects might be using scaled Agile, others are using Scrum at scale, or XP, or Kanban, and a number of other things. And when we talk about planned events, those would be your standard events, the 5 events that you have for that go with Agile and so on. And generally, it's company-wide Agile adoption. So those are the pros, saying, yes, we are an Agile company, whatever that means. The cons we found were, as I mentioned earlier, that the implementations vary enormously between some of the projects and functions. As I said, some are really doing a good job and some are just not. We have frequent senior management input, and that could be a problem with senior management can turn around and say, new priority, go do this, or go do this directly to the teams. Not exactly an Agile-like approach. And that's a problem. The other thing we have is portfolio management that we're handling right now. For how do you handle all the projects that even a super large company like Siemens wants to do? Can't do everything at once. So you have portfolio management, looking at what Scaled Agile does, for example. It's with your wish shift and everything else. The whole idea there is how do you make your determinations, which projects to go forward with, and so on. The other question is the issue of metrics, and it's a big problem. We've talked about it in other presentations, where the metrics don't metrics are great indicators of when things go right, go wrong, speed of the team, and so on. But really good metrics, you want to, first of all, they're only indicators, and you need to follow up with them. You don't want to make definitive conclusions based on your metrics. But the other thing is, your metrics should, if you have metrics that are at the team level, you still should have some metrics that go up to the program level, and then also that can go up to the portfolio level also. And then there are capacity and role issues. So there's a whole bunch of things here that we're really talking about that are cons. There's a number of things that were pros. So the question is, where do we go from here? How do we sit there and say, where are we in this agile maturity, and start to determine what we need to do to be able to improve our implementations of agile? So the first thing we did was we came up with a mission statement. And I apologize, I'm going to read this to you. And that is, Siemens is embarking on a journey to elevate agile practices to improve transparency, alignment, and collaboration in everything we do. This effort will benefit all stakeholders by providing clear priorities and a framework for managing projects that is visible to all. That are visible to all. There will be a focus on reducing non-value added activities, managing dependencies, and enabling impediment removal at every level. It is our mission to empower team members to conquer new challenges and embrace opportunities with renewed ambition. Taking this mouthful and making it much shorter, the main thing is we're saying, yes, this is a long journey. I don't think we'll ever hit the end of it, but it's a long journey. And what we want to do is we want to continuously, iteratively improve our implementation of Agile. So along those lines, there are some ways that we want to do this. Where do we stand right now overall? And what do we need to do to move forward? Now, the second thing along those lines is that we need to create, if we want to get an idea of just where are we as a company, we need to be able to create our own agile maturity measurement. And that's what we call our C. We've made it much simpler than these 5 levels or 7 levels that you might see, or 4 levels. We have 3 levels. It's starting, evolving, and excelling. That's it. Starting is you're just starting out. You're learning the basics, the 3-5-3, 3 roles, 5 events, and so on. And all we're trying to do is make sure that everyone has that base moving forward. So what we did was, now we're implementing that when someone starts at the company, they're going to get it, and regardless of the level of training beforehand. They could be an expert in Agile. They could know how to spell Agile. Doesn't matter. They're still going to have to get some basic training, which a few hours of training, overview, reading, and so on, to make sure that they've got a base from which to start. Okay. We then have evolving, which is on the level of you've already implemented scaled Agile. You've already implemented Agile. And what happens is it's evolving. How do we make it better, and so on. And that could involve coaching and so on. It's a much faster jump between starting to evolving than from evolving to excelling. Excelling means that you really are seeing the benefits of Agile. The evolving stage, you're starting to see some benefits. I put this on the same level of, and by making it this simple, I put it on the same level as like when you do effort point estimation, which is you could sit there and you could argue for hours about, oh, this is 7 effort points, 6 effort points. Well, you could do it really quickly and say, hey, based on our experience and this reference point, let's just see whatever the average is. Let's put this together, so to speak, and we've got our number, and we move forward quickly. We look at it more, and that's the way we look at it with the points that I'll get into a little bit more. The starting, the evolving, the excelling are things that we use on a regular these are the points that we use on a regular basis, and it follows Shu-Ha-Ri. And where the Shu is, you're learning the basics. So that's on the starting point. These are the fundamentals. You're learning, how to use Agile. You're learning about Agile and so on. Starting to use it a little bit, but you're following exactly what it is pretty much by rote, how to use Agile. In the Ha part, it's that self-recognition, innovation. You're beginning to get a good idea of how it works, how to use it and so on. And you're starting to work with it a little bit, kind of implement it, put some changes in to help the team or project move forward. That's the evolving stage. And then when you get to the Re stage, you get to what they call transcendence. I call it expertise or mastery. I don't know how much you can master Agile, but as much as you can, that's where you get to excel in it. And that's when you're really starting to manipulate it and use it. Remember, because it is a framework, you're taking it and you've been constantly putting these changes in as you're evolving, iterative changes, so that you start to really excel in it. And that's when you start to see the real benefits of Agile. And that's when your customers start to see the benefits. And that's when the teams start to see the benefits. And that's when things start to really flow together. So by keeping this really simple, we have our C, and the C as works in accordance with this Shu-Ha-Ri. You can say C, we see Shu-Ha-Ri. But the main idea here is that it's this approach which says, okay, we want to be able to, with our end goal of really being able to meet the needs that we have for our customers and for our development efforts, what do we have to do? How do we go from this evolving to excelling point? And admittedly, it's small steps, but we can, one of the things we can do is we can start to identify what those steps are and what we have to do. So the first thing we need to do when we do a survey is we have to determine our target audience and where we're going to address our questions. And in trying to do this assessment and so on, we decided that our target audience was primarily the team and on the program level. And that includes, for this particular thing, that includes the program level is including the Scrum Master and the product owner. So you have the team. We weren't going to ask direct questions on the portfolio and senior management level, because first of all, we know that that's lagging and that's an area of weakness. But second of all, there are a lot of questions that we might be asking that aren't relevant to the team and the program. So our assessment here, our intent was to really work and really understand how this implementation is working and where there are shortcomings and where there are strengths, and then how to use that information. So we have the target audience here, but that doesn't mean that target audience should exclude the senior management. And so the results from the survey have to go to the team, to the program level, and also on the portfolio level, but might have different results that we give to each team. It's not necessary, that we give to each level, and that I'll be discussing a little further on. But I will say this, and that is that the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to give, we don't want to open up the teams to the senior management. We don't want senior management to come in and say, hey, team A, why did you have such a bad result here? Why did you think this? Because that's not their business. And that will really hurt the team and other teams and prevent them from giving us the information we need in our surveys, accurate information, because they'll be afraid. We don't want a fear factor in this. We want honesty. So the interesting thing is the results go out to all three levels, but the input is really coming from two levels right now. Okay, moving forward. So the next question comes down to, where do we get our questions and our categories from? And we got them from several places. One of the places we got was from the metrics when you go to the 7 core competencies of Scaled Agile, because they have a whole bunch of questions that you can ask, and some of them are really quite good. So we would pick and choose from those, and there were a few of us who were working together on a team to be able to determine what questions and review the questions that we had, and so on, that came up. Second location was from McKinsey, and those were questions we made. But they have a very good paper that came out a few years ago on the 5 trademarks of agile organizations. And we looked at that too, because there were certain questions that came up, the way they broke it down in some of the detail, that we were able to develop questions that we thought were very relevant to what we were, to our assessments, to both this assessment and other assessments that we've run. And the third area was from Comparative Agility, because they include many different surveys in Comparative Agility, and some of those surveys, some of the questions are really quite good. And so we were able to go and we picked out a lot of questions from there. And finally, we said we want to make sure that we're on target with what we're asking and so on, where we think there are issues and what we believe are important. But again, this is us talking as opposed to hearing what the teams are talking about, where the teams are issuing. So rather than doing a big survey and then finding we missed our target audience, we went out and spoke to a whole bunch of different individuals. And so we would have interviews with them that lasted an hour. Usually it was anywhere between 4 and 10 people. And here's one, selected feedback that we got, for example, where there are software works in silos, or we have silo issues, or that people are on too many projects, or whatever. The point being, we wanted to make sure that our questions were targeted not just for the issues that were raised here, because then there's a problem. You have other problems that come up, but just to make sure that we were on target, and maybe to get a little feedback, a little understanding of what people were going for, because that gives us insight into into how to move forward with this assessment, other assessments, and the follow-ups. So when we combined all these things, we ended up with a series of questions. And what you can see here is we went out to this survey that we created, went to 173 people, and we divided them into teams. That's one of the great things about Comparative Agility, is you can break things down into different teams. So in the end, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, we could compare the results from one team to another, the strengths and weaknesses and so on. And as I mentioned earlier, we put the product owners and scrum masters into one team, separate team, because what we wanted to do was see if they perceived the difference, if they had the same perceptions as the teams themselves. And if so, that was great. And if not, why not? Where were those differences, and why did those differences occur? We came up with 8 categories, and the survey was 74 questions, which is a long survey. And it took about 20 to 25 minutes roughly for the people who got the survey to answer those questions. And the questions, it was all a choice from 1 to 5, where 1, you disagree with the statement, and 5, you agree very strongly with the statement. Out of those 74 questions, 36 questions were used to determine our agility maturity. And that was throughout the survey. They were spread out throughout the survey. And what ends up happening is we use all those 36 questions, regardless of the questions, were weighted the same. We weren't going to sit there and say, well, this one question is worth more than this question, is 2 times worth more, or 3 times. We could have spent 6 months arguing about that. We took 36 questions we thought were indicative of the 3 levels that we have in C, and just added them up and divided by 36, and whatever average it is, that's where we were. The remaining 38 questions, in addition to those 36 questions, we used as part of our assessments, and that's what we used when we met with the teams and we met with senior management. Okay. Sorry. So now, at this point, we had everything we needed to move forward. We had assigned we had 173 people. We had our questions, we had our categories, we had done our research, we had a measure of what agile maturity meant to Siemens, and we moved forward. And what you can see here is a screen dump from Comparative Agility, and these were the collectors. What you can see over here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, is you can see the different collectors that we had and breakdown of some of the teams below each collector. So, for example, in hardware, we had these teams here, and the survey was sent out to them. What we did was we sent one of the nice things about Comparative Agility is it keeps track of who responds and who doesn't respond to the survey. So we could do follow-ups and to those people who didn't respond and say, hey, we've got a survey, please respond, so to speak. And we got a over 40% response rate, which we were happy with. Anything less than 30, we would have just tossed this whole thing. But with a 40% response rate, we thought we had enough to move forward. And you can see where we have these responses. So we could break it down by teams. We could break it down in these different collectors too. So we can see software versus hardware. So when we meet with management, for example, senior management, we could turn around and say, here's the breakdown in software versus hardware. Here are the results. Here's where we really saw a difference, or here. But when we meet with the teams, we could break down on the team level. So this is the first thing, which was the collectors. The second thing is once we got our reports, one of the nice things about Comparative Agility is you can see the differences. So we could compare teams or groups to get to each other and look at where the differences were. Finally, what we have found is the distribution is really helpful on some questions when you're working with the teams. When you're working on a larger scale, and we're working to, say, talking to senior management, it doesn't matter. They don't care. But the teams, it's interesting. So we use this information as follow-up with the teams. And finally, when we started analyzing the data, the thing that really made it the most sense was the easiest way of doing this was we downloaded all the data, all the results. And it's pretty easy to download, and literally download the results from one of the reports, puts it out in the spreadsheet. We take those results, we throw it into Notepad to clean out any HTML, then put it into Word so that it was properly formatted and so on, and then we copied it into the spreadsheet. So for all the teams and everything else to create this spreadsheet took probably about an hour of work. But the point being that, you see this from column A to column J. In between are all the different teams, say, for hardware. So what happens is very simply, we're able to, on a spreadsheet, do a whole bunch of analysis. Then, now you're dealing with Excel. You've got all the numbers laying right next to each other, so you can compare the teams to each other. You can compare the groups to each other. And for example, you can see right over here, what we've done is we have our 3 main collector groups over here. And we did a very simple analysis to say, where's the largest difference? If the largest difference is greater than, 0.6, we highlighted, just with local conditioning, in Excel. If it's lower than a particular score, we could look at it this way. But the point being, It gave us a basis to be able to do the evaluation. This is something we could show to senior management. In fact, it is what we showed to senior management. Obviously, this stuff wasn't blurred at that point, but they didn't get this stuff below that with the teams. So we could turn around and we could say, okay, when we do a comparison, this was very low. Why was this low? And we highlight certain areas that we thought were problematic. The results were too low. Even if there wasn't a big difference, why is this so low and so on? And led for some very good discussions with senior management. Now, when we go to the team level, what we can do is we can say, and this is team one, say one of the software teams, we can turn around and say, management and people outside the team are unable to give team members work during a sprint. Okay, that's a 1. We strongly disagree with that. That's truly scary, because the implication is that anyone can come right in and say, here's work to do. Where's the Scrum Master? Where's the product owner? And in fact, it was a big difference between this team and all the other teams, software teams. And we denoted that over here. So that's a point of concern. So when we're meeting with the teams now, what we're doing is not only we're taking this assessment results for Agile immaturity, but we're giving us the basis to meet with the teams and start asking questions. And one of the things that we found was that originally we would just meet with the Scrum Master and the product owner and say, here's some suggestions, what's going on. But what we found was that the team, sometimes those suggestions and discussions never got down to the team level. So now what we do is we send out the results for a particular team. So team one would get their results, and they wouldn't see all the other team results because it's not their business. But they'd see the team one, and we send that out to the Scrum Master and the product owner first. And then we meet with the team and the Scrum Master and product owners to have a discussion. What can be improved and so on. Now, this comes down to coaching. You can see other things here. The team is not concerned about knowledge gaps when someone goes on vacation. Someone says it's a 1.5 again. This is software. It's not even hardware. So why is the team so concerned if one person goes on vacation? Is everyone so specialized in the work that they're doing? And so on. So it raises some interesting questions and discussions. And this other one we had in, I think that's blue and partially colorblind. It might not be blue, but team members communicate in an effective manner without undue interference. Well, that's great. We highlighted it because it was such a good response. That's great. They can communicate well. But in that case, that kind of contradicts a little bit with this knowledge gap. So the point being that it leads to some very good discussions. And what we end up doing sometimes is we end up coaching them and sitting there and watching the teams perform, whether it's in stand-ups or it's in the sprint planning or the retrospectives. The point being that we get ideas and then we can give of how things are working, in part based on the results of the survey and then based on observation, because a survey can only go so far. It's just like metrics. It can be an indicator, even a strong indicator of an issue or a strength or something, but then you have to see it. It's that old Gemba. You have to be there. And that's really where we start to work with them to be able to see. And we might be watching a high-performing team too. We take observations from there. So then we go to a different team. We can make suggestions to that team. Hey, here's what other teams are doing, blah, 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 blah. Would you like, you might want to consider this too. So in this way, we're actually using the survey as a base and our observations as a base to start to improve how we implement, how we utilize Agile. And these tables are very important. This Excel spreadsheet is really important. Now, if we go forward from there, since the point of this conversation was how do we measure Agile maturity? Well, we did a survey a couple of years ago, and we found that our Agile maturity on the Siemens scale, the C, was a little over 3.2. I think that's 3.22. And right now, this survey showed, based on the 36 measures that we have, and the measures that we used in the previous one weren't as precise as this. We didn't put as much work into this and as much thought. We didn't know as much at the time. And, some of the people have changed, some of the jobs have changed. But looking at the two things, we can see a nice increase to about 3.57. And it's actually higher than that in terms of certain key elements that we're looking at and so on. So if I were to show something here, what you would see is that in two of our measurements, our team is more responsive to change, which is 4.08. And our customers are more satisfied with the functionality of the products than before, which is 3.89. That's overall. So the point being, we are seeing improvements. We want to see more improvements. Obviously, you always want to see improvement, and there's always ways of tweaking things. But we're actively working on that now to improve the effectiveness of our Agile implementation. Okay? So if we go to the summary of where we are right now, what we did was we created a working definition of the Agile maturity for Siemens, or C. We examined the underlying factors, and we identified the target markets for a survey. In this case, our target markets being the team and the project program level. And then finally, we executed the survey and we organized the results so that we could make use of that, not only just to be able to come up with some number for Agile maturity, but more than that, that the key thing was that we were able to organize the results so that it benefited the company, that we could go in and gave us a basis to work with the company, work with the teams, work with the projects, and really effectively start to help how their implementation of Agile was going. And this is on existing projects, but we've taken this knowledge and we've started to apply it to new projects too. So I'm hoping to see a big jump in our agility rating maturity within the next year or two. That's my presentation for today. I'm open to questions and answers right now. So thank you for attending. Are there any questions?